Welcome to another episode of Back to the Past. I'm Blair. It is very early June, and June isn't really the time of year that most people look forward to doing firewood. But in previous episodes, I'd talked about killing the tree of heaven. And the tree of heaven, some of the species gives off seeds, some don't. So I have concentrated on killing the trees that give off the seeds in order to hopefully annihilate this whole bunch along the front of my property line. So today I am working on cutting down some of the trees that I killed about a year and a half ago, and I don't want them to fall out into the highway. The highway's real close. I don't want them to fall onto my solar panels. I don't want them to fall onto my house. So I want to be able to control where they go. So actually today I'm spending some time taking down the tree of heaven with some traffic going by. One thing that I got finished on this trip was the concrete work for the foundation walls and footings on the barn. And there are 721 bags of sacrete that made up those walls and footings, and I am delighted that they are finally finished. The first 3 pallets I think were 80-pound bags, the rest of them were 60-pound bags, so about 12 yards of concrete that I mixed by hand over a period of a number of months. For being early summer, it is an absolutely gorgeous day today. The temperature is, it looks like about 62 degrees. There's no breeze, there's a bit of a humidity. You might see in the background I got a fire going, burning up some of the branches and stumps that I've had. So let me finish cutting up this last log into firewood, and then we'll go over and take a look at a couple more projects that I'll be working on this trip. Into the area here where the septic system is going to be, you can see that I have mowed through the trees, and you can see all the flags where the engineer had posted for the septic drainage lines and such. The septic tank will be over there, and then all the distribution lines will be here. And in order to do this, there's some trees that's going to have to come out. This group of maples, 5 of them, they're nice shade trees, but maples are kind of a dime a dozen. They grow back really quickly. And then also one more behind me, and then the apple tree, the Japanese crab apple tree that put out the pink blossoms last year, didn't blossom at all this year, and it's pretty much dead, but it's going to be in the way for one of the distribution lines too, so that'll end up coming out. So that may happen on this trip. It may have to wait till the next trip, depending on how much I'm able to get done. Finally, after a number of months and 721 sacks of sacrete, I am finished with the foundation walls and footings for the garage, and ready to start framing on the next trip. Now, so far as concrete work, I still have some slabs to do, and that's going to take probably another 300 bags of concrete, and that will happen after the building is built, and that can be done indoors, probably for the better, to protect it from the weather. Excuse me. I put down the treated bottom plates for what will be the first 2 walls of the barn, that center section that will go up 2 stories high. My probably most important project for this trip is to do some work on this grand old maple tree, and unfortunately it's nearing the end of its life. I think it's I'd love to know exactly how old it is, but it's a very, very old tree. But I described in one other video that this branch that hangs off probably closest to you now is 100% dead. There isn't a single leaf anywhere in that branch, and then also the one coming up from the center of the tree is in the same situation, not a leaf on it. So I have a lift that will be rented maybe starting tomorrow evening, for sure into Saturday, that I'm going to need to completely remove that big branch. And what I've found in cutting branches, trying to make lumber out of them in the past, is it doesn't work really well at all. There's a lot different stresses on the branches than there are on the main trunk of the tree. Part of it being in tension, part of it being in compression, so that after it's cut, it usually almost immediately goes to warping, twisting, and that sort of thing. So I'm thinking that there's going to be a lot of firewood in that one huge branch. At the base, it's about 30, maybe as much as 36 inches in diameter. So with my 24-inch bar on my chainsaw, I'm going to have to be cutting it from both sides. That will be a project for this weekend, and we'll take a look at that as I'm doing that and have the lift set up. So that when winter comes around, I'm using my older wood first. I need to do a little bit of rotating on my firewood pile, and I got to realizing that some of this needs to be split. So I got the splitter out, and we're going to do a little bit of splitting, consolidate this pile, and then go back to taking out the tree of heaven. The firewood is all stacked and ready for new wood. Last night I went ahead and cut down this tree of heaven. It's probably the biggest one I've cut down to date. It's maybe 9 inches in diameter at the base and about 60 feet tall it was. And it was a little bit scary because it was leaning over into the highway. There was one branch about 4 inches in diameter that was actually hanging out over the highway. So what I did is I tied off with a long rope up near the branched area, the first branch, and tied off to the rhino, pulled it tight, and then went ahead and cut it. And I left about a 1-inch hinge on my cut, and then got in the rhino and pulled it over the rest of the way, and that worked just fine. One thing that amazes me is the resiliency of these trees, and it's no wonder they are classified as an invasive species. I had poisoned this tree about 1.5 years ago. There's almost no growth on it. Some of the growth that there was, I went ahead and cut off and burned yesterday. But on a lot of these limb tips were new growth about maybe 6 or 8 inches in length, and a lot of them had flowers on them, some of which had already turned to seed. So even dead or near death, this tree is trying to reproduce and survive. It had literally thousands of seeds left on it. So I'll cut this one up, and then we'll go ahead and try to cut up at least one more today. I got a small one kind of off to the left of the camera, and then a couple of larger ones directly behind the camera, and we'll see what we get done today, but we'll work on that, and then this evening I'll go pick up that lift. Let's get started. That has all the small branches ground up into a composting size. The next thing I'll do is get out the chainsaw and everything that is like 1.5 inches to about 3 inches in diameter. I cut up and set aside for kids and grandkids if they want to come out and make a campfire or whatever. So I'll work on that next, and then get into some of the bigger stuff that I'll use for firewood. I'll probably have to set up the wood splitter again today. Well, the chainsaw made pretty short work of that tree. I think instead of doing more cutting for right now, I'm going to have to run into town on my little chainsaw, the one I use for cutting firewood and would love to have used for this here. The starter recoil mechanism broke, so I've got to go see if I can get some parts for that. I want to save my big chainsaw for what I need to do tomorrow. So We'll see how that goes, and I'll be back with you either cutting down another tree of heaven or on the maple tree tomorrow. Well, here I am at the maple tree with Gabby right beside me. We are looking, nearly straight up, maybe at about a 60-degree angle or so, and we can see the first part of my project, which is going to be that branch there. Now, what I plan on doing is starting at the top and working my way down in firewood lengths. I don't want to try cutting too long of pieces, because as soon as the pieces hit the ground, they're going to roll downhill, and they'll roll into my driveway. And I think I've got the lift set up just out of the way enough that hopefully that doesn't get hit. I'm sure it won't. So it's going to take me a few minutes to kind of plan what I'm going to be doing here, and then to get the chainsaw warmed up, get my safety equipment on, and then we'll go from there. Stick around. This here is the machine that I'll use to get me up there. It has a height capacity of 45 feet, I think, and I think that's to the platform. The top branch up there, I think, is over 50 feet. So I'm hoping that it may be in an elevation right around here, and I may have to start out with something a little longer than 16 inches in length. I may have to start out with a 4-footer just to get me to that first cut. I'm high enough for the first cut. And then once I get that branch that we were looking at cut back as far as I can or near the trunk of the tree, there are more branches directly above the camera that you couldn't see from the earlier video that needs to be cut down too. And what I'll be able to do is, once I get this first branch cut down, is to back this rig up another 8 or 10 feet and maybe move it toward the camera some, and hopefully be able to reach that entire branch too. Also, in the middle of the tree there is another branch, and that one's about, looks like 20 inches in diameter going up, that is also dead. So that one isn't as concerning to me, because if it breaks away, it's probably not going to hurt anything. The worst it would do is to fall into the driveway here, but it more than likely would go the other direction. The one thing that having so much cut off of this side of the tree may do is to throw the balance over in that direction. And my neighbor's driveway is only about 50 or 60 feet away, so potentially, I guess, if the entire tree uprooted and fell over, it could fall into his driveway. But he is a pretty creative person that knows how to take care of himself, so I would just hope that no one would be there at the time that it would fall. And I really don't think it will. Not for a while yet. It's still a pretty good old tree, but it is nearing the end of its life. I don't know if we would be able to see it any better from the air, but we'll take a quick ride around and see what it looks like from up there. Here we go. Before I actually load the chainsaw and get to work, I'm going to go up and make sure that I've got the lift set up in the proper position to be able to reach it all. Here I go. It looks like I have plenty of height to do this. I'll come back down and we'll go into a faster mode. Back for another day. I got that first branch down yesterday, or the top 12 feet or so, the highest portion, and it ended up being pretty much all rotten. I had a fire going last night. I've got a fire going again this morning, trying to burn up the old rotten material, and it burns pretty doggone quickly once it's on the fire. This morning I'm going to go up high and try to remove that branch that's kind of above the work platform there, that extends out to the west. You'd be looking pretty much straight north right now. I'll try to get that one taken care of first, and then there's also one that's kind of hanging over my truck. I don't know that my truck is in the picture here or not. If it is, there's a dead branch hanging out over my truck. I'll have to move my truck, and I'll get that one cut down while I'm set up where I am now. After that, then I'm going to have to move back the machine so that I can reach some of that material that's more in the middle, and then to finish up that log that I started yesterday. And it gets pretty big in diameter. It gets probably at least 30 inches in diameter, so I'm going to have to cut it from both sides. I'll keep working away at it. Now, the first one that I'm working at, I'm not able to get high enough, I don't think, to be able to handle that to start out with anyway in firewood lengths. I'm not going to be able to reach to the tip of that limb. So there's probably going to be a 10 or 12 foot section that's going to have to come down, and I don't think there's anything below it other than some branches on the hackberry tree that might get broken taking that down, but that's what I'll work on next. Got to go change into my grungy cutting clothes, and I'll be right back. Well, that hollowed out log was really hard on the chain, that last cut especially. Squirrels and whatever critters may have carried stuff into it. There was actually a little walnut tree growing in the very top of that stump in a hollowed out area where a squirrel must have carried in a nut and forgot it was there, and it grew into a little tree. Anyway, that's kind of interesting, but right at the end there got to be so much mud and dirt that's in the hollowed out area and water that it was just hell on my blade, my chainsaw blade. So I'm going to have to do some sharpening. I am most of the way through that, and I don't think I want to jeopardize the chain any more than I already have. So I think what I'll try to do is to tie a rope off to it, tie it to my truck, and see if I can just break off what's left. And that's probably all the further down I'll come on that limb. And that limb is about 36 inches in diameter. It's bigger than even what I thought it might have been. Stick around, we'll keep after it. Good morning. I got that branch taken down yesterday and trimmed up and cleaned up, and what I thought was a piece of metal in it was actually a rock. And since that was so hollowed out, what it may have been, there's some kids that were actually a pretty good aim that hit one of the holes in the rock, and it dropped all the way down into the bottom. And I ended up hitting it with the chainsaw, I think 3 different times before I finally got that thing pulled down. But it's done now. I'm finished with that tree. I'm feeling a lot better, because it could have been pretty darn devastating to have that branch fall on that shed. While I have that lift, I'm going to go ahead and set up and try to do a little trimming. I've got a couple pear trees that I'd like to trim down in height some to where I can reach the top of them with the spray to take care of the beetle larva that is hosted by the tree of heaven. Last year it was pretty well overwhelming to the crop of fruit. This year I don't have a lot of pears. I do have a couple of peaches. They're very small from the trees I planted last year, but I'm going to pick them before I leave so that the deer and the other critters don't get them, even though they're not ripe yet. Let's go ahead and move over to the orchard. Well, I'm set up now down in the orchard area. Got the lift set up and leveled, ready to go. On your right, you can see, oh, maybe right beside me here, the apple tree, the crabapple tree that actually this year has some apples on it. I'm kind of happy to see that. And then a little bit further to the right is the Japanese crabapple tree that is pretty much dead and has to come out in order for me to be able to get the septic system in. So the apple tree that actually has the fruit on it this year, I am going to go ahead and take it down a little bit in height, just so I can spray to the top of it. Over on your left, there are a couple of pear trees. One has grown way up into the sky with very tiny branches, so I'm afraid that it needs to be trimmed way back, or any fruit that it produces is just going to lean over and break a bunch of branches like happened last year. So that one I'm going to take down quite a bit. And then over, I think out of the view of the picture, but would be to the left of the camera, are more tree of heaven. If I have time, I may go ahead and cut some tops off of those just to make felling those a little bit easier and less dangerous in the future. Here we go. I don't know how much prettier the fruit trees are, but they are much more manageable now. I would like to have done it during the winter, but that didn't work out. So now's the time. If I've got the lift rented, I'm going to do everything I can with it, because I don't want to spend another $250 just to come back and trim trees. I was a little bit surprised by the amount of pears that there are on the upper branches of that first tree that I trimmed. From the ground you couldn't see a lot, and from the ground there weren't very many. Unfortunately, they're high enough they can't really be harvested. I guess if there are any of them that are good when they fall, that'll be fine. But last year, between the deer and the birds, they ate them before they got even as big as what they did or what they are right now. So there's a possibility I'll get some pears this year. We'll see. I'll pick a few peaches and before too long be on my way home. So I'm going to get this rental equipment back to the rental company, and looks like just in time before it starts raining. It looks like it's just about to bust loose here just about any time. So if you haven't subscribed, please do. Hit the like button down below. I always appreciate that. I really love seeing comments, if there are any. So comment if you please, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.